What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10, and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now, today we are finishing up our talks on the Nature Domain Cleric, and I have a very fun build for you today. It barely fit into our passing score. We got a 7 out of 10. Of course, 6 and below is failing. And so we're going to build one. And I've done some simple builds here over the last couple of weeks. And then this week I thought we'd go a little bit more complicated, so stick with me, it's going to be a fun ride. Before we do that, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch this channel are not subscribed, and we are so close to 1,000. You know, my goal originally at the beginning of the year was to get there by the end of the year. Honestly, if we keep going at the rate that we've been going, we'll be there by the end of next month. So your support is very much appreciated. To all of you that are new, welcome back. And for all of you who have not subscribed yet, come on, now's a great time to do so. You're here in the first 1,000. That's fantastic. So also make sure to click that bell, because apparently YouTube thinks that when you subscribe, you don't want to know when that channel uploads. I don't know, but just go ahead and click that and change it to all. And then of course, share the video with your friends. So the Nature Cleric is very fun, adding some druidic-like features, kind of some ranger features in there a little bit as well, but adding that to the Cleric chassis, which is pretty cool, and it's actually pretty effective. We get some really unique spells that we would not have gotten otherwise, and it's pretty nice. It's a pretty nice kit. We do get heavy armor proficiency on this one as well, one of the few clerics that get that, and of course that's always a welcome sign. And so in today's build, we are going to see just how far we can push a very simple and gimmicky strategy. So let's jump right in. At level 1, we of course are going to choose our race here, and we are going to go custom lineage. Now, custom lineage is, I know, the cop-out race out there, you know, this and variant human, but we are taking a ton of feats on this build, a ton of them. We're only going to have time for one ASI over the course of the entire build, and the rest of it is going to be feats. So, as you can imagine, we need to get started early, or else that number is 0, and I want at least one ASI because, my goodness, it's crazy. So we're going to take this and get our free feat. Now, on this build specifically, I'm going to choose a small-sized character. Now, this is why I chose custom lineage over variant human, because technically you can't be a small human. That's probably something to talk to your DM about if you would prefer to just be a small human, but you know, whatever you want to do. But we're going to go with custom lineage, so that way you can look however you want as long as you are a small size. Now, there is an alternative build which is mechanically probably much better than what I'm actually presenting here today. In fact, I'd probably guarantee that it is, but I wanted to take the fun option over the necessarily mechanically better option, but we will talk about it at the very end with our honorable mentions. I've got a pretty long list of honorable mentions that would probably optimize this a bit more, but you know, we're going for fun here. That's what we do on this channel, and then I'll give you the optimized version at the very end. So we are going to pick up with our free feat, Crusher. Now, this is one of the best half feats that are out there. This one and Fey Touched are two of my favorites. I really like the versatility that it offers you. And so it gives you 3 distinct things. Number 1, we get a bonus to our strength or our constitution. For this build, we're going constitution. We don't really need strength on this build, outside of the requirement to wear heavy armor. That's it. So we just need a 15 in strength, and that is all I care about. So I don't really need the strength bonus, but having a bonus to our constitution is always welcome. You also get 2 other actual features. Now, one is when you hit a creature with bludgeoning damage, you can move them 5 feet. Now, you know, according to physics, it would tell you that you have to move them away from you. This doesn't state that, and so technically you could actually move them towards you if you wanted to. And actually that's probably what we are going to be doing most of the time. Just once we get to a certain point in this build, you're probably going to want to move them closer to you rather than farther away from you, and you'll see why here in a little bit. But it all depends on spacing, and we'll talk about that more in depth once the strategy comes back into play. It also allows advantage on all attack rolls until the start of your next turn if you actually score a critical hit with bludgeoning damage. We're not going to be doing anything to really buff up this feature, but when it happens, it's going to be really, really awesome. And so yeah, that creature is going to be very, very upset. So for our stats, we are of course using our modified standard array once again. If you are using the point buy system or regular standard array or rolled stats, of course you'll just need to adjust these accordingly. But for this, we are going with a 17 in wisdom, a 15 in strength, 13 constitution, 12 dex, 10 charisma, and 8 intelligence. Of course, charisma and intelligence can be swapped around if you need to. They're just our dump stats. But we're using every other stat, which makes this a very mad or multiple ability dependent build. And so that's why we've got a lot of half feats and things like that that are buffing up these stats. We just really need the help in our stats department in all different ways. For our bonuses, we get a +2 from being custom lineage, and so we're going to put that in our wisdom, so we now have a 19, and then we're going to put our +1 from crusher into our constitution, and so that's going to give us a 14, so a +2 bonus. Not too bad. And it's not going to get a whole lot better, unfortunately. So it is what it is. But I think it's still really nice. It's better than 0, right? It's still going to help us with our HP and still going to help us with all of the other things. But mainly, we're going to need it for concentration. And this is why it's nice to be a ranged character, because we really don't want to be taking a lot of hits if we don't have to. We have heavy armor and we're staying in the back. So hopefully we'll be all right. There will be times when we lose concentration, and that's fine, but we're going to do our best to maintain it and just go from there. As far as equipment goes, I want one specific weapon for this, and it's a sling. Now, a sling is a very unique weapon in D&D, and when most people say unique referring to a sling, you would mean bad. And it's one of the least used weapons in D&D 5e. It's pretty rough. So it does 1d4 bludgeoning damage as you throw a rock, and it's normally dexterity based since it's a ranged thing. But however, we're going to find a way around that, and we're going to make this a lot better than it normally would. I'm sure most of you can see where I'm going with this, but we'll get there here in just a second. Before we do, though, we've got to take our first level. Let's jump into this build. So at level 1, we are not starting Cleric. I know normally I try to start with the class that we are featuring for the day, but I can't do it on this build because we need all the help we can get in the Constitution saving throws for the purposes of maintaining concentration. So we're going to start with Fighter. Now, Fighter is really nice because we end up picking up a lot of the proficiencies that we needed anyway, and we still get the Constitution saving throws, so that's really nice. The only downside is that we do slow down our progression of our spell slots and just our spell progression in general. That is a little bit unfortunate, but it's okay. I think it's totally fine. We'll still get where we need to go. We're not going to make it to 9th level spells on this build. We've just got so much multi-classing going on for our gimmick, but it's still okay. And I think that we will still be able to be effective. So as a fighter, we of course have a D10 to our hit die, which is great. That's better than the cleric. So we're going to be a little bit bulkier than normally because we have this. We go ahead and pick up the heavy armor proficiency. We go ahead and pick up all of the weapon proficiencies as well, which is really great. There's just a lot of really good stuff about taking one level in fighter here to start out as far as grabbing all of our proficiencies. As far as features go, we do get a fighting style here at level 1, and we're going to take the archery fighting style. Now, yes, it's called the archery fighting style, but it actually refers to all ranged weapons, which is great. A sling is a ranged weapon, therefore, even though it's not a bow, it still qualifies for the archery fighting style. So we get a +2 bonus to our attacks when we use a ranged weapon. That's fantastic. That's going to help us out, especially since we are using a stat that is not that great on this character. We're just kind of stuck at the moment, and it's just part of it. So we're going to be a pretty not very effective level 1 character, and that's okay. That's okay. We will become more effective as we go, and we'll make it work. It's okay. Just survive level 1. and it'll get better, I promise. We also get Second Wind here, so we can do a little bit of healing to ourselves as a bonus action, so that's really nice. We're not taking a ton of levels into Fighter, not very many at all, so this isn't going to scale all that well, but in a pinch, it can be really nice. At level 2, we're going to go ahead and go Cleric. So we've gotten basically everything we needed out of Fighter for now, and yeah, the rest of this is just going Cleric for a while, and then we'll do some other things. So we are going to grab our spellcasting, our Acolyte of Nature, and our bonus proficiency. Our bonus proficiency becomes redundant on this build just because we already have heavy armor proficiency now, but that's okay. We do get Acolyte of Nature. Now, if you're looking for a lot of detail on each of these features that are specific to the subclass, our video from earlier this week will be up in the icon above right there for you to check out. So that is really, really cool. Also, if you're wanting to check out a build that has no multi-classing for this this subclass, there is a video by the D4 network, the D&D Optimized. Colby over there on that channel does an amazing job with builds kind of similar to what I do, but he goes more for the optimization of it, whereas I go more for the fun aspect. I don't really go for the optimization all that much, although I have in some builds, I guess. But go ahead and check out his Nature Domain Cleric. He does some really, really good stuff, and he does a straight build, and it's really, really cool. Built for sustained damage. Ours is kind of built for that. Kind of, but it's a lot of gimmicks. Ours relies a lot more on gimmicks than his does. But so with Acolyte of Nature, we do get to pick up one Druid cantrip, and we are going to grab Magic Stone. Now, we would not normally get this, and normally we would have to go with like Magic Initiate or something like that, but we go ahead and pick it up for free as a feature, which is fantastic, so we don't have to waste any slots on that. What Magic Stone does is it allows you to take 3 pebbles that you find, and of course, it's a sling. You just pick up rocks off the ground, that's your ammo, right? And the big thing about slings, which I didn't mention earlier, but should have been in my card that you saw, is it does not have the loading property. That's huge. The loading property is the bane of a lot of people's existence when it comes to things like multi-attack and that sort of thing. It's a little tough because then you have to be able to you have to actually be able to load everything, and then you would need something like Crossbow Expert in order to do that. But there's no loading property here, so we're pretty good to go. Of course, we don't have extra attack currently or action surge or anything like that, but eventually we will, and so that's nice. That's one thing that gives us a lot of versatility. Now, Magic Stone allows us to affect 3 different pebbles, and it does a couple of things for us. It makes them magical, which is great. More so, though, it allows us to use our Wisdom modifier for our to hit and to damage instead of having to use our other stats. And so this makes our best stat that much better, right? So we're going to be relying a lot on some saving throws as we go, and we are also going to be using this for our to hit and our to damage. So this is fantastic to be able to do these things. I love this. So having that bonus is nice. Now, the thing about Magic Stone that you want to talk to your DM about is the debate on whether or not you can have this always going at a time, right? It has a limited time frame in which you can use the stones, in which case you'd have to recast it. But it's a cantrip, so you can cast it as much as you want, right? So as a DM, for me, I would say, you can always be fiddling around in your pocket and recasting this every so often just to make sure that you always have this good. I don't see a problem with that. I think it's totally fine. It's a cantrip, right? It's not a big deal. It's 3 stones. Let your player feel powerful. Do it. I don't think it's that big of a problem. So we're going to pick that up there. We also can get things like Sacred Flame, Thaumaturgy, Toll the Dead, things like that. Those are also really good options for backup if you don't want to use your stones, or you just feel like casting a spell instead of throwing a rock, then there you go. But the thing is, this saves your spell slots to be used on those essential healing spells. You're still a cleric. Yes, you have a David complex and you're chucking rocks everywhere, but you're still a cleric, right? So make sure you're still doing cleric things in between those things. You also at first level get Animal Friendship and Speak with Animals for free from your subclass, and then Bane Bless, Cure Wounds, Guiding Bolt. Those are your standard things just to take as a regular cleric. At Cleric 2, we get our Channel Divinity, and so we have our little burst of charming plants and beasts and things. Again, we talked about this on Tuesday. It's a little situational, but when it works, that's great. I think it's a lot of fun, but not the best feature in the world for me. At Cleric 3, we do get no features, but we get second level spells, and we get Bark Skin and Spike Growth. Now, Bark Skin is one that I like on druids. For a cleric, depending on how much armor you have, will either be great or completely useless. You know, it's a little redundant to get Bark Skin and heavy armor proficiency, because, I mean, once you get full plate, Bark Skin is completely irrelevant, right? Obviously, there are things that can affect your AC, but I don't see Bark Skin being useful for this build. However, Spike Growth is going to be our main focus here. We're going to be using this spell all the time, and I really like it. So we create a pretty decent size area. It's a 20 foot circle essentially, and we can just, it makes it difficult terrain, and they take a bunch of damage whenever you walk through it. So that's pretty cool. It's for every 5 feet moved, you take damage. And so as you can see now with Crusher, we can move people 5 feet. So if they are in the spikes or just on the outside of the spikes, we hit them with a rock and move them through the spikes. So it deals a little bit of extra damage, which is really good. Forced movement does force this damage on the spike growth. You know, it's not they avoid it or they go flying above it necessarily. They take the damage. And so I think that's absolutely fantastic. So we're already adding on to our damage in a decent way. Let's add on to it a little bit more as we go, and we are going to do just that. Then, so we also get things like Aid, Hold Person, Lesser Restoration, Prayer of Healing, Spiritual Weapon, all those things. Our bonus action is probably going to be spoken for most of the time, especially after this next level. So Spiritual Weapon's probably not going to be your go-to, but it's a nice little backup option if you want it. At Cleric 4, we get a feat or an ASI, and like I said, we are going feats for most of the way, and we're going to pick up Telekinetic. Now, Telekinetic is another really fantastic half feat, and it gives us some really awesome features. Number one, it gives us a +1 to one of our mental stats, and of course we're going wisdom with this, and this is going to max out our wisdom at 20. Of course, if you have a different method of doing stats, your stats may not line up that way, but this puts us at a 20, which is great. We wanted to get to a 20 as quickly as we possibly could, and this is great because Telekinetic requires a saving throw, a strength saving throw, when we go to telekinetically shove them. So now as a bonus action, we can telekinetically shove 5 feet through the spikes and hit them with an attack for Crusher as our action and move them another 5 feet through the spikes. So we're starting to deal some decent damage, right? It's pretty cool. We also get the Mage Hand cantrip and some buffs to it as well, which is good. It's a really nice feat. I think you get a whole lot of bang for your buck out of this half feat. Really, really cool. At Cleric 5, we get our Destroy Undead feature added on to our Channel Divinity. So the CR maximum is 1/2 for that, but they will blow up if you go to turn undead and they are too weak for that. We also get 3rd level spells. We get Plant Growth, we get Wind Wall for free. Probably not using those too much, but keep your options open. Those aren't terrible spells by any means. And then Dispel Magic, Mass Healing Word, Revivify, all good options. Remember, you're still the Cleric. Revivify, be ready with the gems and just help your party out when they die. It's okay. Level 6, Cleric 6 anyway, we get Dampen Elements, which is good. It's a nice defensive feature to be able to lessen some damage on you or a friend when it's of certain damage types. We also get our second use of Channel Divinity. Now, this is normally where I would tell you to multi-class. However, we're going to keep going in Cleric for just a second because there are a couple of other things that I want to pick up here from the Cleric chassis. At Cleric 7, we don't get any features, but we get 4th level spells, which are nice. Banishment, Death Ward, Freedom of Movement are all really, really nice. I think those are all really good options for you. Cleric 8. Okay, so at the beginning I said we needed to be a small race, and here is where that comes into play. Now, again, I think the optimal way to do this build is the way that I'm going to talk about in the honorable mentions. I'm doing this the fun way, all right? So this is not the optimal way of doing things, but I wanted to take squat nimbleness. You have to be a small race in order to take this, and this makes us a fast boy, and it makes it really, really hard to grapple us. Especially if you're having problems with your DM doing a lot of grapple checks. It depends on your setting, it depends on your DM. You may not see grapple checks at all, in which case you'll probably get a lot less use out of this, but it does increase your speed, which is always appreciated, right? You know, we're not taking any monk levels, we're not doing any kind of bonuses to our speed, there's nothing like that. So, you know, we're a standard speed, and so being able to go a little quicker is nice. I do think a different feat would help us out just a little bit more. But more importantly, squat nimbleness will give us a +1 to our dexterity. We need a +1 to our dexterity, which brings us up to a 13, which you're like, okay, but that doesn't actually change the stat. It's still a +1. And to that, I would say, yes, you're correct, but it does make a difference in another field. And so yeah, I had to wait until now to be able to do a certain thing because I needed that 13 in dexterity. We'll talk about that in a second. So we also get our Destroy Undead upgraded to a CR1, and we also get Divine Strike. Now, Divine Strike is amazing on this because we just get to add extra damage. Free extra damage, we take that, and then of course this is going to scale at Cleric 14, which unfortunately we are not gonna quite get to on this build. We're gonna get really close, but not quite. So at this point in the character's life, there is a bit of a shift, and honestly, it's not that big of a shift, right? This multi-class option that we're taking here for our third class is pretty on flavor. It's not that outside of our realm here. We are going to, you know, while we like rocks, we also are going to take an interest in maybe it's bugs, maybe it's beetles, maybe it's some other kind of thing of nature like this, and we're going to start taking ranger levels. Now, I don't believe I've done any ranger multi-classes just yet on the channel, so I'm glad to be able to do this. We of course are going to be using the new rules from Tasha's. I say new, Tasha's really isn't that new of a book anymore, but we're going to be using the rules from there as far as the new ranger, because the old ranger is really bad, and so I haven't made any videos about ranger just yet, but once I get there, we will be going into a lot of detail about ranger. So again, another reason to be subscribed, right? So you don't miss when we do that. But we get a few things here. So we get Favored Foe, which is the new version, and Deft Explorer, which is also the better feature here. So Canny helps us out with some expertise and that sort of thing. And we just get an upgrade to the Favored Foe. We're not going to be using that feature though, because it's not great. Even in its new form, we're not going to be using that. Even Hunter's Mark would beat this, and we're still we're not using Hunter's Mark either, because what we're doing is just straight up better already. So we're not really going to be using that feature all that much. We're just kind of trying to get past this to Ranger 2. So at Ranger 2, we get a fighting style. We're going to have archery. If only we could take that twice, but we can't. We're going to end up taking defense here just for some extra AC. Again, you know, we want to stay defensive because our constitution isn't all that great. So, you know, being able to get away from hits is really, really nice. Talk to your DM about whether or not you can wield a shield. Now, technically, since this doesn't have the loading property, technically you don't have to have a free hand. But as far as like for realism, you would kind of need one. So yeah, talk to your DM about this. It's very, very strange as far as how the sling goes, just not having the loading property. It's very weird how it functions as far as quote unquote realism. But I personally would allow it, but that's up to you. I'm not assuming that when I look at the AC of this character. I'm not assuming that we have a shield, because I'm assuming you need a free hand, and because you also, if you need to cast spells and that sort of thing, you need a free hand and all that good stuff. But you know, it is what it is. So take the defense fighting style. You could also take Druidic Warrior. That's also a more than viable option. And there are some other really good ones, but this is the one that I chose for this one. We also get spells for Rangers, which is good. So this is going to help our spell progression not be so bad, but it's still holding us back a little bit from the full caster potential. But we can pick up a defensive spell such as Absorb Elements. I love this because it is so flavorful with our Dampen Elements feature that we got just a few levels ago, and we can pick up Goodberry. Who doesn't want Goodberry, right? So at Ranger 3, this is where our love for the small forces of nature that form into one cohesive unit. This is where our interest really shows itself, right? So we get Primal Awareness, which is all right, and then we get the Gathered Swarm and Swarmkeeper magic features. We're going with the Swarmkeeper Ranger. And this is one of my favorite Rangers. It's not my absolute favorite, but it's really fun. My sister actually played one of these in my Curse of Strahd campaign that I'm currently running, and it was a ton of fun. Of course, you have the ability to move yourself with the swarm, and so she named herself Time because time flies. And yeah, so there's your joke. You can tell me how good or bad that joke was down in the comments below. I'd love to know. But yeah, she had a really good time with that, and I think that this kit is really cool. So we get a few things here, right? So we get a few extra spells. We get things like Mage Hand and Fairy Fire. Mage Hand we already got from Telekinetic. Fairy Fire requires concentration, so we're probably going to be using Spike Growth. But Fairy Fire could be useful. It's a very good spell. So definitely don't count that out as an option to be used later. But we also get our Gathered Swarm is kind of where this is at, right? So when we hit a creature with an attack on our turn, we can choose to do one of three things. Now, this is only once per turn, not once per attack, unfortunately. I really wish it was once per attack, but that would kind of be busted. It's fine. Anyway, so we can add a little bit of extra damage. We can choose to move ourselves as our swarm like picks us up and pulls us away, or we can choose to move a creature 15 feet. That's the one we're going for right now. This is another strength saving throw. So our gimmick now is correct positioning and 2 strength saving throws to get the full use out of our features. Is it optimal? Absolutely not. Is it fun? Yes. And the few times that this works, it's going to be awesome, right? So here's how we do this. You have your stones ready beforehand, and you can go ahead and cast your Spike Growth at the beginning, either right before combat or as soon as combat starts, and then you can Telekinetic Shove on your bonus action if you want to. Then the next turn, you go ahead and Telekinetic Shove them first thing to get them into position, or if they're already into position, just go ahead and sling a Magic Stone, at which time you have the Crusher feat to move them 5 feet. They then have to make a strength saving throw or get moved 15 more feet, so that's 20 feet of movement through the spikes, and then you can telekinetically shove them again on your bonus action for another 5 feet. That's 25 feet of movement, plus the damage you're already doing on the Spike Growth, plus your damage from your Divine Strike. So you've got a lot of racked up damage here, and it's nice, it's fun, and it's pretty repeatable. Obviously you're gonna have to give up the Telekinetic Shove every so often in order to get more stones, but that's honestly fine. I'm totally cool with that, just because it's just fun being able to force movement of your opponents, right? I think this is just a super fun way to move everything around. And you're like, well, I'm not doing quite enough damage though, right? Is there a way to make it better? You better believe it, because at Ranger 4 we're taking Sharpshooter. Yeah, we're adding even more on to our damage here. So when we make a ranged attack, we get some bonuses here. So now we no longer have to worry about the long range detriment to the sling. This is really great, and this is kind of what sets it apart from why use a sling rather than just throwing the rocks, right? Well, because you have that 120-foot range, you at least could have attacked at disadvantage with that. Now it just doesn't matter. You just have 120-foot range with this sling. That's huge, right? That's super far away. You can just stay really stealthy and just clock people from a mile away with a rock. And I think that's just hilarious. Just from out of the shadows, a rock comes flying and bops somebody in the head. So that's awesome. You also will get to ignore cover, which is great as well. That's absolutely fantastic, especially if you're going for the final part of this, where you can take a -5 to hit, but a +10 to damage. So if your damage wasn't stupid enough, this just made it that much more stupid, and we're all about that. I think this is absolutely amazing. This just takes your damage and turns it up to 11 here, and over these next few levels we make huge gains in how much damage we can do in a turn. Just in the next like 3 or 4 levels, we're making a huge improvement. We're late bloomers on this build, but it all kind of comes together at once. So we get extra attack at Ranger 5. You also might be saying, hey Dapper, why not just go to Fighter 5 and pick up another subclass that way? And to which I say, we'll talk about that at the end of the video. So there you go, we'll get to that. I did consider that, and there was a version of this build that did that, but I decided against it because of reasons we'll talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, we go ahead and pick up extra attack, and we also go ahead and pick up our 2nd level Ranger spells. There's not a ton of them that I really want here. Higher level Ranger spells are pretty nice, but as far as like for what I get here, I'm not that impressed. Pass Without Trace is nice, but I mean at this point, you know, it's late to be getting new 2nd level spells, so you know, it is what it is. Then Cleric 9. We're back to Cleric already, right? It's been a while since our deity has seen us, you know, actually worshiping in a proper manner, but I mean Ranger isn't that far out of the realm, so it's all good. It's all good. We get Insect Plague and Tree Stride. Getting Insect Plague is kind of what inspired me to do the Swarm Keeper build with this, and it just kind of all snowballed together into what you see now. But you get Insect Plague, so now you can take your swarm and send them on somebody and just do a bunch of damage that way, so that's really cool. Tree Stride is a really cool teleportation spell that allows you to move around a map really quickly, which is good. Greater Restoration, Mass Cure Wounds, and Raise Dead are all here as well. This is a crucial level for spells. I would not be upset if you decided to go with Cleric 9 before multi-classing. It makes a whole lot of sense to go ahead and pick up those 5th level spells. I totally get that, no problem. Next, we're gonna go Fighter. I know we're 3 classes and 3 levels. We're gonna go Fighter here and go ahead and pick up Action Surge. So we're not gonna use this all the time, right? Because we're gonna run out of stones really quick, all within 1 turn actually, and then the last stone we chuck is gonna be a normal stone. But it's okay, right? Because you can still apply Sharpshooter, although I probably wouldn't, just because you're not using Wisdom at that point. You're using one of your worst stats, so it's got a lot lower chance to hit. Probably wouldn't use Sharpshooter on that shot, but you could use it on the other 3, which is all really, really nice. And so you've got a really big bonus to hit by now. You know, we're getting up there in level, and we're dealing a lot of damage, and we're still healing people, and we're not taking a whole lot of damage ourselves because of our high AC. If we'd gone with the other version of the build, we'd be taking a lot less damage for other reasons too, but we'll talk about that. There's just a lot of really cool things to love right now, and I think it's just a lot of fun. At Cleric 10, we of course get Divine Intervention, whatever. Cleric 11, we get our Destroy Undead moved up to a CR2, which is cool, and we get 6th level spells, so Harm, Heal, and Sunbeam are all really good. Cleric 12, we get an ASI or a feat, and I think I'm finally done taking feats. I could take one more, and there's a really good argument to just take another feat here, and we'll talk about that in the honorable mentions, but I'm gonna just go ahead and bump up our Constitution here to a 16. This gives us more hit points, gives us a better bonus to our concentration checks, all of the things, all kinds of good things come out of bumping our Constitution here. At Cleric 13, that's level 20. Yeah, that's it. So we're gonna go ahead and pick up our 7th level Cleric spells with Firestorm and Resurrection. So that is our build for today. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. It's a bit of a gimmick, and it's not always gonna work out, but it's fun. It's a fun build, and that's what I promised. For our other options that I consider, there are a lot of honorable mentions here, honestly. I went through several versions of this build before I landed on the one that you are seeing today. Originally, there was a couple levels of Artificer. However,
It also slowed down our spell progression, just like the ranger levels do. So you could have taken that instead of the fighter levels. You wouldn't have gotten a fighting style, but you could have had a +1 sling, which is good. However, you know, if you've got a DM that's worth anything, you're going to eventually pick up some kind of a magic sling or something like that eventually. And so that's probably going to end up outpacing what you have as far as the artificer. And then those 2 levels end up just becoming for the just for the constitution saving throws, which I'm not so much about. You know, you get one other infusion that you can use, but you know, I don't think it's the best option to go with, but either way, it's fine. Plus, you have to then have your intelligence up at a +3 or at a 13, and that just was not going to work. That was just not going to work on this build. Then we had fighter. I thought about going farther into fighter, more specifically either Battlemaster or the Echo Knight. Now, a lot more so Battlemaster. Echo Knight is cool, but the extra attack you get from it has to be a melee attack, so positioning becomes a problem. But then as a Battlemaster, you could do things like trip enemies while within the difficult terrain, and so then they're not getting out of it, and you can just have them locked down within all of that. Plus, it adds a little bit of extra damage as well. So there's some cool stuff there. Of course, Rune Knight is also another good one, just because some of these saves are size dependent. So being large size also really makes a difference. So there is definitely a good case to be made for going fighter 5. The only thing about it is that it slows your spell progression even more, because it's an extra level in order to get there. It's actually 2 extra levels in order to get to that place. So, you know, we're not going to end up getting another we're not going to end up getting 7th level spells. So if you're willing to give up 7th level spells, then by all means go that, and don't go through don't do Ranger 4 and 5, just do Fighter 2 through 5. So I mean, that's another totally viable way to do that, but you're gonna lose out on your Cleric 13 7th level spells. You'll still get the ASI from Cleric 12 when you get to Fighter 4, so you don't miss out on that necessarily. So you know, it's an okay trade-off, I guess. But you know, Ranger is still half caster if nothing else, so it still affects your progression at the very least, right? We also considered going Gloomstalker Ranger, just for that extra damage. However, that is, one, it's not really our flavor, because we're not going to be very sneaky because of our armor, so that doesn't help. And I mean, our dexterity isn't all that great, so our bonus to initiative isn't great. It would be really nice to have a great bonus to initiative, like, you know, it'll help, but our bonus to initiative is not high enough to where I can feel comfortable, you know, going before everybody else and getting that extra attack and all those good things. This just isn't really built for that, so it's an option, but not for this build. I also considered going with a Warlock, and more specifically the Genie Warlock. Now, I love the flavor of Cleric and Warlock builds. Same thing with Paladin Warlock, although it makes a lot more mechanical sense. I love the idea of Cleric and Warlock builds, just because, you know, you're trying to serve 2 masters on 2 completely sides of the spectrum, 2 completely different sides of the spectrum, and so there's a lot going on in that character. That's a very interesting character to play, and I think that's really, really fun. I think it's really cool. But the Dow Genie would have been really cool, because then you get to add extra damage when you do certain things, and I think that's also cool. It's bludgeoning damage, so it all fits with Crusher, so that way, you know, when you cast a spell, you could also move things around through the spikes as well, so that's really cool. I think the Dow Genie is really, really awesome. Again, our charisma would have had to be at the forefront as well, so again, our stats would have been really messed up, and I couldn't get the stats to work out. We were already way too strained at the moment. As far as races go, I only really had one, and it's the Furbolg. The Furbolg is really, really nice, and I think it gives you a lot of really good options as far as being able to turn invisible and being able to change your appearance and that sort of thing. I also thought about the Leonin, but you know, it does have its roar feature is on a bonus action. You know, we're using our bonus action to keep our stones going or our telekinetic shoves, and so that's just kind of crowding our bonus action up a little bit. Even though that feature is really good, I think it's just kind of crowding that up a little bit. But Leonin is totally fine. Then for our feats, I had a few, and I think they all could have worked at different points during the build. So instead of taking the +2 to Constitution at Cleric 12, you could have taken Warcaster, which would have given you advantage on your concentration checks. However, you wouldn't have gotten the extra HP, and the melee, them leaving your range to cast a spell is fine. But you know, I mean, how often are we going to be trying to be in melee with everything? Not that often, right? I don't think that we're trying to be up in people's faces. It would just kind of be an emergency thing. And so I don't think we're going to get nearly as much out of it. Obviously, advantage on concentration is huge. But I think a +2 to Constitution is just going to give us a little bit more benefit overall. Gunner is also an interesting one to take here instead of Sharpshooter, but obviously Sharpshooter is just better. One thing I thought about for this is if you could, and this is a very big long shot, and I would say most of your DMs are going to say no, if you could convince your DM to say that a gun does bludgeoning damage, then you could call this build Guns N' Roses. I love the ability to call a build that, because then, you know, if it's bludgeoning damage coming from a gun, then you're obviously going to be dealing bludgeoning damage, and then you can move them around with a gun and you just ditch the sling. So yeah, that's how you build Guns N' Roses, because you got your spike growth as the roses. But I don't think that a DM is going to rule that way. So let me know if your DM will rule that way, but I kind of doubt it. And then finally, instead of our Dwarven Fortitude, we could have taken Resilient Dexterity. That is probably a much more optimal option because, you know, we've got AC pretty decent. You know, we've got our AC going pretty well. However, our dexterity saving throws, not so much, right? And that's going to be something that's going to come up pretty commonly. And we do not have proficiency in that. We have strength and constitution. We do not have our dexterity, and we don't have any of our mental stats. So if we could at least shore up all of our physical ones, that would be really nice. Plus, that would also give us the +1 to dexterity that we needed in order to multi-class. So it kind of knocks out 2 birds with 1 stone there. You know, pun intended, because of the sling. I think that resilient dexterity rather is probably your best option instead of the squat nimbleness. But again, I wanted to use squat nimbleness. I just think it's fun. I think it's great. Actually, this past week I played a one-shot. My Curse of Strahd group, we take a week every so often in order to just play a fun one-shot in order to break up the horror aspect of everything. And I let one of my players run that one-shot, and we did an Earth Day themed Dr. Seuss one-shot, which is pretty cool. And so I got to play as Thing 1, and so I was a small custom lineage thing. And so I took squat nimbleness, and so that was a really cool, fun experience for me to be able to play a character like that. It was just a ton of fun. So yeah, it's a really good option. I think that resilient dexterity really is probably your better option overall, but for fun's sake, being able to run even faster is really awesome. Next week, of course, we're going to be talking about the Order Domain Cleric, and so, you know, straighten up. We're going to be talking about the rules, and you better be following them, and that's about that. All that is. So until next week, stay safe out there, stay healthy. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and until next time, bye bye.